stage. John serves as the chairman of BVL, the Bowlers to Veterans Link, to give us an update on all the work that BVL does for our veterans.
So Frankie, you needed my help today? What did he do while I was in the back? What's going on here? Before I start, I have a couple of things. Where's my buddy Mike Albee? Is he here? He happens to be the chairman of the Bowling Hall of Fame, and I have a deck of cards from 1942, the first tool that was used by the Bowlers Victory Legion. They gave 100,000 decks of cards to soldiers, many disabled, so they would have some peace of mind. Hold that, it's the only deck we have.
I will take that.
Thank you. Is my friend Sidney Weiss in the room? Could you put the lights up a little bit? Would that cause more problems? World War II veteran, where are you, my friend? There he is to my left. God bless you. Next to me, he's the other nicest man on Long Island. So, are there any other World War II veterans? Anyone else that has served, just stand up because today is about you. God bless you all. We do this every year. I know we kind of miscued our timing. Any of the award winners, if you're here, go to the back of the room. I want to tell you about a gentleman who's going to speak for BVL today, and I hope for many times hereafter. Combat wounded Staff Sergeant, retired Johnny Joey Jones, turned a traumatic, life-changing disability into a personal mission to improve the lives of all veterans. Joey is the chief spokesperson for Zach Brown's Southern Ground, which produces an array of quality products and services, as well as television and music production, all for the purpose of financially sustaining Camp Southern Ground, a 400-acre camp and retreat for children ages 7 to 17 and military families. Joey is also regularly appearing on Fox News as an analyst. He's featured on television, he speaks to the issue that BVL has always supported, and that's recreational therapy. He's been on the big screen. He was in the movie Lincoln. He produced, wrote, and starred in an independent film, Range 15. He was on DirecTV's series, Religion of Sports, detailing Joey's upbringing and his involvement with NASCAR. Known to his friends as Triple J, Jones was raised in Dalton, Georgia, and enlisted in the Marine Corps after high school. During his 8 years of service, he worked as an explosive ordnance disposal bomb technician, deploying to both Iraq and Afghanistan on separate tours. During his last deployment, he was responsible for disarming and destroying more than 80 improvised explosive devices. On August 6, 2010, Joey was struck by an IED, resulting in the loss of both legs above his knee and severe damage to his right forearm and both wrists. He recovered at Walter Reed National Medical Center, a VA facility that BVL has always supported. After his initial recovery, he went for his BA at Georgetown. Wouldn't that be the natural thing to do? He has always fostered relationships with veterans. After losing his childhood friend to a PTSD-related suicide, Jones decided to make veterans' issues a key part of his professional work. Throughout his post-military career, he's advised many, including both President Bush and President Obama. He is involved with the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. He's a wonderful patriot. Escorting him down are all the award winners who have raised $1,069,000 this past year, led by Princeton, Illinois, USBC, WBA, Metro Phoenix, and we always thank the state of California for raising, this year, $113,000. Meet Staff Sergeant Johnny Joey Jones.
Getting colder, summer getting warmer, tidal wave come across the Mexican border. Wide back gallon is cheaper by the barrel, just don't get busted singing Christmas carols. That's us, that's right, gotta love this American ride. Both ends of the ozone burning, funny how the world keeps turning. Look small, no hand, I love this American. Gets her rocks off, watching Desperate Housewife. Daddy works his ass.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joey Jones.
Good afternoon. Hey, listen, real quick, let's get a few things out of the way. I call it housekeeping. It's so that we both have a really good time and you guys don't hurt my feelings. I'm from Georgia. I talk really slow. Kind of takes me 5 minutes to say, hey, my name's Joey. And on top of that, I tell a lot of jokes, but most of them aren't funny. So if I kind of give you one of these, just laugh with me and make me feel good about it, okay? And then I'll know if you're paying attention. First of all, John, thank you so much. I met John a few months ago up in Colorado, and he's the only grown man I let call me babe, and for some reason it works for him, so we're rocking it. And then another thing real quick, I didn't write, produce, and star in the movie Range 15, but it was written, produced, and starred by military veterans that are close friends of mine. I was a co-producer and had a good part in there as a zombie, so not a lot of dialogue, but it was a really good time. And so, yes, don't want to take credit that isn't mine. And I did advise President Obama, but I only had dinner with President Bush, so that everything else should be pretty accurate. And real quick, you know, I'm a pretty fluid guy. So I had dinner with President Obama. I was in the White House 2012. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And I was sitting there. I was within arm's reach of him. Actually, I was up against him at a table. And he was kind of known at the time as the first president to carry a cell phone, a smartphone. So he'd pull it out at different times in the evening and check it. And I thought, you know, I'm going to read something I shouldn't read. Some guy's going to come out of the ceiling and pull me up, be interrogated here. But at some point during the dinner, he's a very impersonable guy. At some point, he looked at me and he said, Johnny, I'm not even going to try to impersonate him because it'd be pretty bad, but he said, Johnny, if you were right back where you were at, where you got hurt, if you're right back there now, what would you do? And I said, well, Mr. President, I'd step left. He didn't understand what I was talking about. Thankfully, it was a room full of generals. They all got it. He laughed because they laughed and we had a good time. But, you know, what he was getting at, he wanted to know my perspective. And so I told him, listen, I don't know what happened everywhere else in Afghanistan or even the other parts of Iraq, but the two places I was at, they went from ghost towns and really mafia-held territories to flourishing markets and to minimal sacrifice of our own, probably mostly through sacrifice of the townspeople who put faith in us to be their security so they could rebuild their lives. And so that's kind of a snapshot of how I got involved and the things I do now. Just being a voice, I like to talk a lot. That's why I'm standing in front of you right now. And so to back up, tell you a little bit about myself, why I'm here today, and why what you all do is so important to me. That's kind of why I'm here to talk. So I was in the Marine Corps. I joined in 2005 from Dalton, Georgia. If there's anyone here from Georgia, you know about carpet. You know, every piece of carpet you walked on to get here was probably made in Dalton, Georgia. I would almost put money on it. And so that's where I'm from. I'm from Dalton, Georgia. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. My dad was a brick and block mason. My mom cleaned houses and bowled. And that's like, that was our life. And so I tell people I left and joined the Marine Corps to get away from hard work because my dad was pretty tough about it. And so I joined the Marine Corps. I was lucky enough in 2007 to move into a field called explosive ordnance disposal, or to be a bomb technician. And essentially, I was I was in Iraq. I was providing security for these bomb techs, and they would get out of their truck. We would find something hazardous. They would get out of their truck. They'd have kind of relaxed uniform regulations for no other reason than they knew they could get away with it. They used first names only. They didn't use last name or rank. They talked really cool. But at the end of the day, they took the risk that we didn't even know how to take. They walked downrange when we thought we had a bomb. They put their hands on it. They took it apart. They removed it, and they made life safer for not only us, but the people that lived in the countries we were working in. And I was just really impressed by that. My brother-in-law, who's been a fireman for 20 years, said it best. The difference between infantry or the ground troops and EOD is kind of like the difference between police and fire. You know when you want the police around and when you don't, but when you don't know who else to call, you call the fire department. It's kind of the same thing in the military. When you don't know who else to call, you call EOD, and I love that. I love that, the idea that my entire life and dedication would be to take a little bit of a risk that other people didn't have to take and hopefully make the world a safer place. So in 2007, while in Iraq, I laterally moved into EOD, started training with those guys, stayed on for another half a deployment, came back home, went to school for it, went back in 2010 as an explosive ordnance disposal technician, and because of attrition, meaning my buddies were getting killed and injured so much, I became a team leader on my first deployment as a school-trained EOD tech. And so I made it through almost 6 months in this deployment, and we were in the toughest and at the time deadliest place and part of the Afghan war. And finally, on the morning of August 6, 2010, I lost my legs. I like to say that I had my legs explosively removed to even the playing field because I was single back then. And the ladies like a guy with a southern accent, I'll just tell you that right now. And so I woke up in the hospital 2 days later in Germany. And usually when I talk, the focal point, what I want people to take away from what I have to say is the idea that changing your perspective can change the outcome and the adversity you're dealing with. For example, if you have a car accident or you're dealing with cancer or the loss of a loved one or financial hardships, those are things you can't control. You didn't choose to be in those situations. But when you get put in those situations, how you respond to them, well, that's 100% up to you. And oftentimes, getting through that adversity is as simple as starting with changing your own perspective. Focusing on the things you can control and focusing on how you're going to respond to that adversity. Someone once came up to me and said, "You know, I don't know how you stay so positive after you lost your legs." So I just looked them back in the face and said, "I don't know how you ever get negative. You have yours." And that's not a perspective or that's not a mindset that's easily obtained. My hope is that by hearing me talk and letting me tell my stories and share a little bit about myself with you, you don't have to go through something as severe as losing your legs or any number of other things to start living your life in a way that you add perspective. When you're driving in 5 o'clock traffic and you're late for somewhere and you really want to be there, so you start to get angry and the cars around you aren't moving and people are cutting you off and you start to get angry and you start to really, hate starts to fester in your heart, that's an opportunity to hit the pause button, to turn on your favorite song, because everyone's got an iPhone, to put the air conditioner at the perfect temperature, if it's 63, 71, 55, whatever it may be, and just enjoy the fact that the biggest problem in your life is that you're perfectly comfortable listening to the best music around, and you have to sit there and continue to do that. That's perspective. Perspective is being dealt a situation and choosing to respond to it. And so that's how I live my life. I've not always been able to do that, I'll tell you. So in August 6, 2010, I was taking apart bombs, just like I had done every day for 6 months. Essentially what happened is the explosive ordnance disposal technician, the EOD tech, the bomb tech that worked under me, did something he wasn't supposed to do. He picked up a piece of ordnance and moved it that's not supposed to be moved because sometimes simply moving that particular piece of ordnance could blow it up. And he moved it because he thought he was making the world safer. He thought he was making our area safer. So I got on to him. Told him, and the reason why, just like with your children, you want to leave a lasting impression so they don't do that again. So it hurt his feelings and he walked away from me. And there was an engineer. Does anybody know what an engineer is in the military? So unlike bomb techs, engineers do more than just explosives. They actually sometimes are the ones in charge of building things, but a lot of times their traditional job, going back to that deck of cards in the 1940s, is to remove obstacles. So I had an engineer with me because that transforms into helping us remove bombs that are placed in the ground. And so this guy was from Knoxville, Tennessee. He was a University of Tennessee fan. So not really sure if he had a soul. I don't know how anyone could like that color of orange, but I'm from Georgia. Go Dogs. If anyone says Roll Tide, you're kicked out. So college football's a thing. You might have heard of it. We're second best. And so this guy was from Knoxville, Tennessee. He was a UT fan. He was a full-time fireman, and he was a reserve Marine, and he fought and clawed and found his way onto a full deployment in Afghanistan because that's what he wanted to do. He felt like he wasn't truly serving until he had that opportunity. So his name was Daniel Greer. He was standing across from me. He was 10 feet in front of me. And he would not leave me when my teammate walked away and had to check this piece of ordnance because he felt like it would be unsafe to leave me there by myself in case I got shot. So I told him, you need to back away. And he said, well, I'm backing away as far as I can. I'm going to make sure you're okay. So I reached over behind a wall. I shined a flashlight in the back of this piece of ordnance. And I looked at it to see if it had the type of fusing which would cause it to blow up at any moment. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you, I can't remember what kind of fusing it had in it because after I shined my light and looked at it, when I took a step back to the right, remember I told the president I stepped left, when I stood right, I got blown up. I stepped on an IED that I didn't know was there. It flew me through the air and I landed on my back. And this is where a lot of people get confused. They think that if you get blown up, you get knocked out. But usually unless something hits you in the head, you don't get knocked out and you kind of are awake. So I landed on my back, I looked down, my legs were gone, I knew what to do. I'd seen it dozens of times. Just earlier that week, I'd put a Navy corpsman on the bird who had lost his legs in a very similar fashion. And just found out that day he didn't make it, but we did everything we could do to keep him alive. So when I looked down, I saw my legs weren't there. I reached up to grab a tourniquet off my shoulder. You put the tourniquets on your shoulders and your hips because if you put them any further out, chances are they'll go flying with whatever body part you're trying to tourniquet. That's funny. You can laugh at that. And so when I reached up to grab a tourniquet off my shoulder, when I pulled my arm up, my hand stayed in my lap. And I remember thinking, and I'm not kidding you, I remember thinking, man, I can get by without doing squats, but how am I going to get another girlfriend if I can't do curls? And so I tried to put my arm away, and I was thinking these crazy Marines will just cut it on off trying to help me, and if I can just hide it and get to a Navy, someone with a college education, maybe they'll fix me. And so I remember thinking that. And so finally, after a few minutes, another Marine got to me. Because the thing is, in this war we're fighting, much like in a minefield, if someone gets blown up, you can't just run to them. That's what the enemy wants to happen. Because if that happens, they'll place other bombs around that bomb so that when you get blown up and someone runs to help you, they get blown up too, and you multiply your casualties that way. They know that we care about our injured and wounded, so they know that we'll send more guys in to help us, and our mission becomes to save lives. And it's kind of a war of attrition that way. That's how they work. So when I was laying there, I realized I was bleeding out of 3 limbs and not 2, kind of doing the math, and thought, well, you know, chances are probably not going to make it out of this one, but that's okay. So when the Marine finally got to me, I was going into shock. And so obviously I'm thinking about doing curls and women. And so looking down, knowing that a bomb went off underneath me, as soon as he got there, you know, as a healthy young man, there's one thing I wanted to know about, is it still there? That's a knee. So get your mind out of the gutter. Because with one knee, you can do things like walk upstairs without a handrail, ride a motorcycle, climb ladders. I don't know what you guys were laughing at, but and so when he got there, I asked, you know, do I have a knee left? And he said, yeah, I think so, ma'am. You're going to be okay. And he starts to go to work, and I got to thinking, you know, this isn't good. It's probably not going to end up well. So I thought, you know, Lord's Prayer. So I said, man, will you please say the Lord's Prayer with me? He said, yeah, sure, absolutely. So we started, you know, our Father who art in heaven, with liberty and justice for all. And what I realized was that I hadn't gone to church quite as much as I thought I had. And I was really hoping that God left that one up to interpretation. It's one of those, the meaning is more important than the execution. So about that time, my eyes swelled shut. They shot me full of morphine, and I went off to La La Land. And 2 days later, I woke up. And the first thing I asked about was Daniel Greer. I remember just before I was knocked out, that I saw him laying on his belly, looking back at me. No blood, but kind of a blank stare on his face. And so I asked the nurse that woke me up. They pull a tube out of your throat and let you breathe on your own. You cough and choke, beg for water. They won't give it to you. It's torture, and that's okay. I said, you know, is Greer okay? And she said, don't worry, honey, you're going to walk again. And for a minute, I was distracted from worrying about my buddy, and I heard her say, don't worry, honey, you're going to walk again. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if she said, honey, I was high on painkillers. But that stuck with me. Those words, don't worry, you're going to walk again, from a perfect stranger. And the thing is, it wasn't until years later that I realized I believed her. That just her telling me that in the moment when I needed it most, I believed her. So for the next year, every time an obstacle got in my way that might prohibit me from walking again, well, it didn't have a chance on me because I believed the whole time I was going to walk again, because some lady I didn't know told me I was going to walk again. And see, that changed my perspective. That a year later, the moment I realized that, what I realized was that we have the opportunity to affect the trajectory of someone's life every single day. All we have to do is speak up. And so everyone in this audience has the opportunity to remind the person next to them that that obstacle they're going through, that adversity, that adverse situation, that torturous moment or that financial difficulty, you have the opportunity to change someone's trajectory, to tell them, don't worry, you're going to be okay again. You're going to walk. You're going to get through this. That's an amazing thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's powerful. And it's something that you all have. You know, I tell kids at Camp Southern Ground every time they come in that patriotism isn't waving a flag or standing for the anthem, although those are things I believe in. Patriotism is loving that stranger you pass on the street because we're sharing this with them. We're in this together. We have more reasons in this country to dislike each other, more subgroups, more different religions and ethnicities and backgrounds than any other place in the world. Yet the only reason we exist is we believed in each other enough to fight for it. The only reason I'm standing here in front of you is you believed in me enough to put me back together again. And that's what I stand for. And I stand. It's a big deal. And so that's important to me that I get that point across to you guys. It's not because I went to war a couple of times or learned how to walk or went through this or went through that. It's that perspective that I gained that qualifies me to talk to you. I have credibility because of those things, but it's that idea, it's that experience that I think qualifies me to speak to anyone. So I ask you when you leave today to take that into consideration and try to apply it to your life. If you're going through something in your own life, tell yourself, listen, it's not the cards I'm dealt, it's how I play them. So as I went through my recovery, or as I went through that day when they woke me up, I finally got back around and asked, hey, how's Corporal Daniel Greer? She finally broke down and told me that his family was there. They had flown him to Germany. He had received a traumatic brain injury, and they were taking him off life support, and he had passed away. And that's important to point out, not because it's sad, but because it's very true. You see, oftentimes in life, we get hung up on what's fair, what should have happened, what shouldn't happen. He got this, why don't I get that? And the truth of it is, I was in charge of that scene. I was the expert who knew how to neutralize the bomb, and I'm the one that stepped on it. But Daniel Greer is the one that paid the ultimate sacrifice. He paid the price for my actions. And that's not to say I made a mistake. I didn't put the bomb on the ground. I did everything I knew to do. So it's not a guilt thing. It's a reality. And that same lesson can be applied in all things in life. Our blessings and our failures sometimes aren't our fault. See, we never, ever compare tragedy, but we always share in victory. And that's something I learned. A really wise person once told me, we owe it to those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to live and live well. Now, to me, that means I owe it to Daniel Greer to not dwell on the fact that my actions led to that bomb going off. But for you, it means that you owe it to Daniel Greer to bowl, to enjoy your life, to do what you're doing, to bring joy to other people, to give families a place to go and enjoy themselves, to get away from these things I'm talking about that are so heavy. Part of changing your perspective is allowing you the opportunity to do so. And so I want to thank you for what you do because you save lives in that way. And I spoke at a conference earlier this year, and it was family entertainment centers, which is essentially a lot of what you guys do. And I'm not sure if they truly understood what I was saying. What I was saying was thank you. Thank you for giving a dysfunctional family from Dalton, Georgia, a bowling alley to show up at, leave the Budweiser at home because Dad liked it too much, and the Bible at home because Mom recited it too much, and just bowl. Be in a family environment to throw balls down a lane and watch pins fall down. It was an amazing time. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. You gave my family a release. You give millions of families a release every day, and more importantly, or just as importantly, You give veterans who have struggled and people who have struggled in adversity a place to go and put a smile on their face again. And so back to my story, I recovered. I was injured August 6, 2010. I started going to college October 2010. I'm no mathematician, that's pretty quick. I was from Georgia, I need all the help I could get. I started walking February 2011, and I started working full-time at the House Veterans Affairs Committee in June 2011. So that's 10 and a half months later, I was working full-time. I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I didn't want to be a patient anymore. I didn't want to be a guy with no legs anymore. I wanted to be a contributive member of my society. That was my goal, and that's how I saw it fit. But there were other things I needed to do. Those were academic. That was work. I needed to get out and have fun. So for me, I found hand cycles. If you haven't seen them, three-wheeled bicycles that you crank with your hand. I knew I enjoyed it. I didn't know much about training for it. So when I finally got in a place where I could get on one and do it well and get my arms repaired, I hand cycled all the time. I hand cycled up hills, down hills. If you've ever been to D.C., I lived off the Mount Vernon Trail. I wore my name in that thing every single day. I didn't look up and research how to train. I didn't know what I was doing. And then finally one year I had the opportunity to compete in the Marine Corps Marathon. And so I show up with my hand cycle. I get there, I get ready to go. They set us off. There's 65 hand cycles. There were 13 world-class champions in their own right, hand cyclists there. And I took off, and I was scared to death. I was just going to embarrass myself. I was a Marine. I wanted to do well. So I hand cycled as hard as I could, and I was going around turns, and I didn't know who else was there. I thought it was just a bunch of wounded guys like me until finally I passed this guy, and he yelled a bunch of things at me, and about 5 miles later I realized it was in French. And so basically I passed someone that had come all the way from France to do this, and I felt kind of good about that. So when we finally finished, I finished 11th out of 65, and I finished ahead of 5 of the world-class athletes that were there. And that was a milestone for me. But doing that, it's not an accolade, it was an experience. It was an opportunity. I wanted to run a marathon. I ran all the time before I got hurt. And so I had a decision to make when my recovery. I could dwell on the fact that I'd never be able to run a marathon with my own 2 legs, or I could find a way to run a marathon myself. And so when we talk about wounded warriors and those who have suffered injuries, it's important that you understand we're not limited, we're adaptive. See, we're not the resentment of war, we are the resilience of war. It's our perspective that sets us apart because we're surrounded by those who have a similar experience in that special sauce, that Paris Island, that Fort Benning, that idea that we're a part of something bigger than we are and we can get through it. But the cool thing is you all can learn that too, if you haven't already. And so I was able to do that on a hand cycle. I was able to get out and do something recreational, something that was just simply fun, and actually get something out of it that changed my own life, that gave me strength and gave me inspiration. And so as I finished my recovery, I went to school at Georgetown. Apparently they'll let anybody in these days. I started working on the House Veterans Affairs Committee in D.C., and what would happen was back then there were 2 places. There was Walter Reed, which was ran by the Army, and there was Bethesda Naval, which was ran by the Navy and where the Marines went. But all the amputee rehab was over at Walter Reed. So what would happen is the Marines and Army were kind of getting blown up about the same. There were 5 of us in the ward. When I got hurt 2 weeks later, there were 50. The war got really crazy there for a few months. And so because I was NEO-DTEC, there were only about 300 of us when I got hurt. There's almost 500 now in the Marine Corps, which is really small. It's about a quarter of the size of the Navy SEAL community. It's not to compare us, we're way cooler, but the point being, super small. And so what would happen is 50 guys up there, mostly guys up there injured, but about every 5th one was a Marine NEO-DTEC, because if bombs are the main source of getting injured, the guys that work on them are going to be the ones getting injured most often. So I'd visit room to room. So what would happen was after I finished my recovery and got sent over to Walter Reed to get my prosthetics, I realized all those guys back at Bethesda never got to see anyone walking on legs. They didn't understand what was at the end of the tunnel. They couldn't see what they were working towards. And so I went around and I would visit my buddies that were there, the dozen or so of them, and I realized, why would I skip 5 Marines to visit the one I know? Why wouldn't I just visit all 5? So I tried that one Thursday evening, made it about halfway around. It was midnight, and they were screaming at me to get the heck out of the room. And so the next week I went and I asked other Marines to come with me and other soldiers to come with me even. And before you know it, I had a dozen coming with me, and we were visiting everyone there. And that's kind of what springboarded. Getting recognized for doing the right thing is kind of what put me at the dinner table with President Obama and all those other things that really don't matter at all. But I realized that's what I had a passion for. At the same time, I was dealing with painkiller addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder with my best friend who had just gotten back from Iraq, and trying to find him help, and the VA didn't want to give it to him. They didn't want to do inpatient rehabilitation. They only wanted him to do the Narc-Anon meetings. And so finally one day I got a call and he took his own life. And at the same time I was experiencing the joys of my recovery and seeing these guys room to room, and I realized that there's something more here. I've learned something that not everyone injured gets to learn, and that's the value of life, and that the fact that no matter what today holds, no matter how difficult it is, the prospect of tomorrow is a cause worthy of all your strength. And I had the opportunity to learn that either God or my family or the universe gave me that gift, and this was my opportunity to share it with others, so that's what I do now. And so finally, I got done with the Hill. I realized if I really want to change the world, I had to get as far away from D.C. as possible. Thanks for laughing. It ain't a joke. And so I moved to Texas. It's a true story. I was admitted to Georgetown and Harvard Law Schools. I was looking at those letters and looking at a job offer. It was 2014, and realized that two things. One, Texas was a better place to live than either of those two places, and two, there were a lot less jobs than places in law school. So I went to Texas. I took an executive role at the Boot Campaign, which was a military nonprofit that got celebrities to wear combat boots to show their support for the military. And I started working in the military nonprofit space, and it changed my life forever, and I'll probably always have some connection to that. And so that was the trajectory of my life. In 2015, I met a musician named Zach Brown. You guys might have heard of him. He's really good. He talks about fried chicken all the time. We like our chicken fried. And Zach shared with me not his music, but his camp, Camp Southern Ground, a place where kids, specifically those in the autism spectrum, but all kids could come and be challenged to play archery tag and climb a ropes course and eat organic food that they helped grow in our garden, and do axe throwing and archery and biking through miles of trails and getting to see nature and understanding and appreciating the value and fun and just getting out and working a little bit and appreciating each other. And so that's something that really resonated with me. These things I learned in the veteran community. See, the one thing that you guys will learn if you care is there's no such thing as veterans issues. There are issues that we deal with as humans that happen to sometimes affect veterans at a higher number. That's all. I don't care if it's war or what it is. You know how many people's lives were changed because I got blown up? There's moms and dads and brothers and sisters and girlfriends and other girlfriends, and I've got little boys, something called a baby mama. Don't worry about that. If you don't have one, don't get one. But it affects everyone in your life, you know. And so this whole entire country has paid the price of us being at war. And so those issues like painkiller addiction or depression or finding a job or the fact that the government promises you one thing and does another, those are issues that we all deal with in some way, shape, or form, just like adversity. And I realized this was an opportunity to take what I learned and were sharing with veterans and using to hopefully save a few other best friends because I couldn't save my own, and I could share those with kids. And the idea being that Zach has that we share in is rather than being the generation that reads on Facebook that some young man with Down syndrome has a bakery and going, how in the world is that possible? We could create the generation that says, I know. That's not a surprise. To understand that these kids that have their own types of challenges bring value and have gifts of their own, and not only deserve to be loved, but have more love in them than most of us have. And so that's where I work now. I work at a camp that specializes or focuses in the autism spectrum, but we also point an arrow towards kids who lost a parent in war, who had a parent who was injured severely in war, or had a parent who came home and died by suicide after war. And so that's the demographic of kids at Camp Southern Ground, and now we're building programs in the wintertime to bring in veterans and basically put them through camp and specialize in teaching them how to create relationships again and hold relationships again and be successful in the workforce. And so I share that with you because it all started with a lady looking at me and saying, honey, you're going to walk again. All these exciting things that I don't get to take credit for but get to tell you about and be a part of. They were all sparked by a selfless individual that I didn't know telling me what I needed to hear. Oh, and it was true when I needed to hear it. And so that's perspective. You see, a smart person, probably someone at Harvard Law School, would tell you that glass of water in front of you is either half empty or half full. But I'll tell you, as a Georgia boy, that perspective is looking at that glass of water and saying, am I filling it up or pouring it out? And see, that's a gift that you have already. No form of education or tool in your toolbox is needed. You simply have to make that choice. And it's a choice I was able to make. And so I'll harp on that, and I want you all to take that away because it's incredibly important. There's no age limit in this. There's nothing that can hold you back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm standing in front of you and I don't have legs. And it's not because of how awesome I am. It's because someone told me what I need to hear and I had a village to put the man back together. They say it takes a village to raise a man. I say it takes a country to raise him back up. And that's all of you. Your patriotism shines. I believe that America's greatest generation saved us from being at war with half the Western world. And it really bothers me when people start talking about how dire a situation we're in. Because I don't know what it's like to stand in a government cheese line or to turn in everything I have that's metal or to spend my last dollar on a war bond. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in the greatest country in the world. We live in the greatest country in the world, not because of the size of our military, or the amount of wealth we have, or even our free system of government. We live in the greatest country in the world because when one of us falls down, 5 of us pick that person back up, dust them off, and say, let's get that again. No matter what they look like, where they pray, or who they voted for. We inherently care about one another, even though we're subdivided in every way you can think of. Because we know how special it is to live here. We know that we live in a place where there is some sort of social guarantee. There is some sort of care by the numbers. But there's also personal accountability and the opportunity to go from here to here on our own. I'm a living, breathing product of that. Before I came up here, John told me to break a leg, and I looked back and said, well, if I do, if I got to wait on the VA to fix it, it'll take another year, so don't say that. You all raise money, from what I understand, upwards of $1 million, and you fund programs and recreational opportunities for veterans. I'm here to tell you thank you. From the bottom of my heart on behalf of 22 million veterans. People say 1% of the military has served. That's a lie. Less than 1% is serving. 22 million people, almost 10%, have served. There's another 60 million living in their homes. Military service affects each and every one of us. So your generosity, your care, your passion, your patriotism, most importantly, your love, is going towards and helping men and women who are willing to raise their right hand. And by the way, if you've ever called me a hero, do it because I raised my right hand. Everything else is circumstantial, and by that measure, there's a lot of heroes in this room right now. But you give your money towards causes that help those individuals reclaim their life and, most importantly, reclaim their smile. I can tell you, without recreational therapy, without opportunities to smile and enjoy life again, and being taught that I could do so, all the other stuff wouldn't matter. The time on Capitol Hill, the college, all of it. The impromptu line in the Academy Award-winning film Lincoln, all of it. None of it would matter. None of it would have been possible. So on behalf of all veterans, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for everything you do. Please continue to do it. Most importantly, the best way to serve our veterans and to serve this country is to look to your left, look to your right, and find a reason to smile and tell that person you can walk again. You can get up and you can do it. Listen, I'm Johnny Joey Jones. God bless you all. God bless America. Thank you very much.
You know what to do, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.